Welcome back to ABL review. ABL, I don't remember what I call this. I know it's not ABL podcast from Dakota's here. ABL review when I'm reviewing stuff. So I guess this is the ABL review for the draft of the Pokemon Champions League. Oh wow, this is off center me. That looks better, doesn't it? Yeah. So this is the ABL. This is the ABL Champions League. Playing in Champions. This is the first time we're doing this. So thank you all for coming along for that. We're going to be doing this is really going to be kind of an explorative thing here. So I guess in a way it's good some of the way the votes went, but you know, not necessarily that I agree with them. So we're going to jump into this. I'm going to do a little bit different sort of presentation here, just kind of see how I like it. So bear with me. So here we've got Mike's team. So I have the draft and the team sheet both here on the same thing. I think the draft order in some cases can kind of tell a story. And in addition to the, you might be able to see the draft strategy here a little bit more than you would probably see it otherwise. So, I mean, we're going to start off. He took Mega Starmie right off the top. I think Mega Starmie, once it was determined it was not going to be banned, was always going first in this draft. I don't think anybody doubted that. So, good on him, he got it. I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how the meta develops around that. And we're also going to talk about the 2-pick because I think that additionally, there's some knock-on effects of this. Goes with Glamora. He's got 2 spinners right off the bat. Then goes with Dragonite. Dragonite needs the hazard control, so I think that's a good call. Picks up a 3rd spinner in Serena. So Glamora works best as a hazard setter / special attacker. Starmie, you don't want to have to put spin on Mega Starmie in most cases. You don't want to have to rely on it. It wants all of its move slots. Serena is, I think, a pretty reliable spinner because there's not a ton of moves you want to put on it. So I think that's good. And then you've got Tinkaton, best typing in the game. Snorlax, I'm interested to see how he uses Snorlax, kind of a limited meta game. So I do think most of the items that Snorlax does like to use are in the game. I think it'll be fine. Chandelure, if you're going to go with Pokemon that have rocks weaknesses, yeah, I mean, you have the team to do it. Alolan Ninetales, always nice in an offensive metagame. I think this is going to be an offensive metagame. To have a Veil Setter, Mega Heracross, kind of a middling speed tier, but we'll talk about speed tiers as we go. Crocodile is also one that I considered. You want to get a ground type, you want to get an electric immunity on most teams, so that's as good of any. Let's hop over here to the speed stats. So not really any concerning gaps, big drop off from 72 to 30, but I mean here's the thing. He's got all the speed gaps filled in, not a problem, but there is significant Pokemon in the 70 to 60 range who might have wanted to run offensive, but now just can run full bulk, because as long as you stay above Snorlax, which is basically never running speed, I do think you might want to fill out lower speed tiers at least a little bit, but I think these are the most important ones to fill out, and he has that. So not really a problem there. Arguably a little bit of a ground weakness. He's got the immunity with Dragonite, solid resists in Serena and Heracross, but quite a few scattered weaknesses along the way. And then also we'll talk about the rocks weakness. This is a little bit more concerning than in past seasons, just because there's no heavy duty boots, so your team will get worn down faster. And this rock weakness is going to be an indicator of that. He's got 3 Pokemon that are rock weak. The 2 resists are kind of irrelevant. But this rock column here, which normally I say to just go ahead and ignore, is a little bit more relevant than it has been in past seasons. Otherwise, really well filled out. I like it a lot. What was I gonna? Oh, so the ground and rock problem. Now, because you have 2 strong physical attacking water types went early in the draft, a lot of people worked to counter those. So what are the first two types you think of that resist water? Is water and grass. Now, this ground and rock weakness is probably going to be a little bit more of a problem because everyone's going to have rock and ground Pokemon on their team. Like, Edgequake is a tough coverage to deal with anyways. So, like, that in and of itself is something to look out for. Wait, why am I talking about this rock and ground? Oh, so because you don't want to load up on rock and ground types is my point. Sorry, I got a little confused. It's more important to have the water resist than the grass resist, which he does have covered. I went down a little tangent there that was incorrect. So, yeah. In terms of, like I talked about, we have good hazard control, good hazard setters. Like he's got screen support. Not that screen support is, like I said, screen support tends to be big in offensive metagames. I think this is going to be a faster paced metagame because you can't have a lot of Pokemon holding leftovers. You can't have a lot of Pokemon holding boots. So it's a little bit hard to kind of, it's a little bit hard to be defensive in that sort of metagame. So there's going to be an offensive metagame. Having a little Ninetales just to even if you don't use it as setup opportunity, just to take less damage for a little bit. Just it buys you a couple extra turns of HP when you can still deal full damage to your opponent, if that makes sense. Average stats. I mean, this average of this 101 is actually incorrect because this Starmie is actually like the equivalent of having 220 base attack, so it's significantly higher on this average chart. But none of these numbers look bad. I mean, I think the power level is going to be significantly higher here just because there's no NFE Pokemon that are going to be sucking that stat level down. And since we're working in, it's a smaller pool for sure, but also only 6 people are drafting out instead of 8. It's a little bit easier to get better Pokemon. Like the cheapest Pokemon he has is Chandelure at 6 points. Oh, never mind. He's also got Raichu. Silly me. So yeah, but I think that's kind of an indicator of the power level of this. We can move on to the next team, where we've got my team. Now, my team's stat is obviously messed up because Palafin has different stats than this, but I don't know how to make that show up, so I'm just not going to worry about it. Okay, so yeah, you can see that I went with Palafin right off the bat. I was always going to do that. I went with Excadrill to follow that up just because I really wanted a solid spinner, and I wanted a steel type. You know, those are, two of the best guys to have. Like, Excadrill does those things really well. Followed up with Hydreigon, honestly, in large part because it deals with Starmie, it deals with some of the other first-round picks that got taken. It addresses those issues. Infernape, I wanted more speed, I wanted a fighting type. This guy's got it covered. Hatterene gives me a little bit more help on the hazard front. Excadrill, I don't want to have it be spinning every week. Hatterene can help with that. And additionally, Fairy type is great to have, right? Followed up with Frostlass. Really strong special attacker. Good speed tier. I'm a little bit disappointed I didn't get anything in like an elite speed tier. Could be a problem for me, but is what it is. Hydrapple, I don't love that I doubled up on dragons, but I felt Hydrapple was a really important thing to pair with Palafin because the attacks that are going to hit Palafin super effective before I have to switch out. Hydrapple can tank and potentially just regenerate back. So that's why it was important to me to get Hydrapple. As soon as you take Excadrill, you immediately have to consider taking T-Tar. I now have another Stealth Rocker that is really good, and it's a Pokemon I'm comfortable with that also supports Excadrill. So really happy about that. And there's definitely a weather component to quite a few teams. So I think it's important to be able to disrupt weather. We got Rotom Fan. I initially put in Rotom F and it pulled up Rotom Frost. I'm like, oh shit, had to change it to Rotom S real quick. Forget that's Rotom Spin. But this is the one I was trying to get. I just needed a flying type, needed an electric type, you know, and this works for that. And then at that point, I only had so many points left. I knew I wanted Toxicroak. Toxicroak was something I had pegged pretty early on. It's a Pokemon I've always wanted to use. Doubled up on fighting types, but I'll kind of explain to you why I think that is okay for me. And then Araquanid was just like a nice another thing to have. I didn't want Palafin to be my only water type, and it also gives me a, you know, a Weber. So that was my draft strategy there. Coming over here, we're gonna look at the speed tiers. You know, this gap between 120 and 108, kind of big, but the thing is, I can't think of a lot of stuff that's like 118, 119 that's going to be able to drop down and still stay ahead of Infernape. There's quite a few things at 120, but they're going to have to compete with Frostlass, so they kind of have to be 120, right? Palafin's actually at 100 in both forms, so that's accurate. Hydreigon at 98. I like having stuff in that high 90 range. Same thing with Extra. Like, I don't have any gaps that concern me. This is actually a really big drop off from 85 down to 61. This is probably an exploitable spot that if people are going to come in at me, they'll be able to run a lot of adamant, very bulky Pokemon in the 80 and below range. So that is a problem for me, but you know, it's one of the things you just have to address, right? And then I got a couple things to fill at the low end. Like, I like where I'm at with this because I can't, like, I don't mind running a little bit of speed on Hydrapple to outspeed something in the 60 range. Obviously, I'm not really ever considering running speed on Hatterene, except maybe, like, you know, I will, because it's SP now, not EVs, so that's another thing I gotta recalibrate my brain for. But imagine, like, running 2 or 3 SPs on a Pokemon. Maybe to speed creep something. It's like at 30 for Hatterene, but that's my thoughts on the speed tiers. I didn't pay a lot of attention to this section while I was drafting, so I also have a couple of Rock's weaknesses to worry about. Hopefully I can mitigate that with Magic Bounce and Rapid Spin. The flying weakness is something that concerns me, but there's not a ton of offensive flying types in the league. We'll see how that changes. I kind of anticipate people using ad drops pretty offensively quite a bit, so we'll see where that goes. And then Fairy. I don't love my Fairy weakness. That definitely is a problem, but I have some stuff to deal with it, so we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And then moving on from that, like, you know, let's go through the normal checks. We got I talked about the hazard control in spin and bounce. I don't think Rotoms have access to defog anymore. I'll have to check that real quick because it's so hard to keep track of like what still gets what in these new metas. So bear with me for 1 minute. Champions, ROTOM, Rotom fan. Defog. No, doesn't get it anymore. I didn't really think so, but, you know, doesn't hurt to check. Yeah, Rotom fan, just, you know, nice to have a flying type, nice to have an electric type. Although, I don't know that electric types are super important in this, in like the champions metagame. I don't really know why I think that. I just feel like I don't see a lot of them, and I've never been like, man, I really need a fast Thunderbolt on this team. That's just kind of where I'm at with it. And then stat-wise, I'm pretty happy with where everything is. Like I said, I'm maybe a little bit slower than I'd like to be. I have, you know, Araquanid to try to help make up for that. Moving on, we got Ishii. Okay, so it's hard for me to break down Ishii's team because he is one of those people who kind of drafts, I think, just different kind of, he doesn't like, because look, he's got his Fire, Water, Grass, he's got a Fairy, Steel, Dragon. He doesn't do things that are super out of the box, but I guess just the Pokemon he chooses for the roles aren't ones I would consider. So he thinks about things a different way than I do, so it's harder for me to accurately judge. One of the things I do like is he went and got Mega Delphox. Mega Delphox, I said from the time like when we first saw the stats in Pokemon ZA, I said Mega Delphox will be good if it keeps Blaze. If it just has Blaze, it'll be good. Levitate isn't like amazing on it, but it takes away a weakness. It takes away, you know, any worry about spikes or toxic spikes or sticky web. So it doesn't hurt by any means. It's not an amazing ability. I know some people wanted this to have Psychic Surge, which I don't know why you'd want that, because then we have to ban it. And then he also went and got Mega Glamora. So this is, I think, the first time that we're talking about like the 2 megas. So I think this is going to be kind of an evolving thing about how we view these. Because Mega Glamora is also one that if you wanted to keep it as regular Glamora, just itemless, essentially Glamora, just to get up hazards, I think it can do that job pretty well. And then if Delphox goes down unexpectedly, you switch it in, it gets caught, then you can still Mega Evolve Glamora and be pretty strong, pretty fast, be very situational. So these two, Delphox and Glamora, very well might come to the same battles. But this is going to be kind of an evolving thing. Are people going to like take 2 megas that kind of have a similar role, like fast special attacker, like we see here? Because also Gengar falls into a similar role that Mega Glamora does, in terms of just like a fast special attacker. So that'll be an interesting evolution there. I don't think that. So if we're gonna, I don't know. I don't, especially in this one, I don't really like to break down like, oh, did people reach on this Pokemon? Because you take the Pokemon when you think you're ready to take it. I would consider waiting, like I would look at, let me pull up the actual draft for a second. So here's the actual draft. I'll give you an example of what I was talking about here. So on the comeback here, I was like, okay, I'm going to take Excadrill and Hydreigon. That's not a really good example because there's not much to go off of, but it's just like, I'm going to take Excadrill first because Drill is still something that he might want in this setup here. Like I look at what my opponents have already taken to figure out if I need to take it. So, so Hatterene. I took Hatterene here because I'm like, okay, a run is starting on fairies. We saw Zhang take a fairy early on, and then everyone kind of ignored it for a while. And then we see Sylveon go. That's the first one off the board. I take Infernape, Serena, Tinkaton goes. Okay, a second fairy has gone. Probably more fairies are going to go in the next wheel here. So I want to get the one I want. I took Hatterene. This team already had a fairy. This team already had a fairy. This team didn't take a fairy. Logan takes Floette, Eternal, Clefable on the comeback. Now everyone has their fairies. I could have potentially missed out on Hatterene here. That's how I look at it when choosing the order in which to take stuff. Very rarely do I look at the cost. So some people might say, hey, Sinistra's a reach here. If you wanted Sinistra and you were afraid it might go, it's harder to make those judgment calls early on because there's so many like Pokemon yet to be taken. Like just take things whenever you want. Kangaskhan, I probably would have continued to wait on regular Kangaskhan, but if you feel like it's important and the other stuff that you're looking at isn't like as crucial, yeah, go ahead and take Kangaskhan whenever. That's my 2 cents on that. So let's get back to the breakdown of the team here. Now, this red box I think is scary in this particular metagame because not only on the first 2 teams we talked about are there scary water types, but since so many since water covers water, every team has a pretty strong water type. Looking down the line, he's going to be facing a Greninja, a Suing Samurott, a regular Starmie, which I still don't think you should underestimate. And I mean, I guess on Dakota's team, like Rotom Wash isn't as scary, but I think having 4 Pokemon weak to water is potentially a problem, although you do have a really reliable switch in the form of Hisuian Gudra on water types. So a little less of a problem. Also, you have Sun, so that's something to consider. You know what? And something I didn't think about until now. So Torkoal's off the board. He's got 1, 2 hazard clearing options. That's another reason Glamora might come to a couple games, even if it doesn't mega, just because it's gonna spin. Torkoal, also your spinner. I think on this team, I wouldn't have minded to see him target a chlorophyll user, like, you know, even regular Scovillain or Victory Bell, something like that, just to kind of help out the team a little bit more. I think that would be helpful over something like, because like Gengar went late. Like I said, I think you got your poison type, you already have a ghost type. I don't know that Gengar is going to do a lot for you. I would have probably looked for a chlorophyll user here late in the game if you're going to take Torkoal, because right now the only thing that Torkoal is helping with is giving Delphox stronger fire attacks, which is good, but I would just want to squeeze a little bit more value out of Torkoal if I could. Rockers, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 rockers. It's really good. Quaquaval's a really good spinner, maybe a little bit weakened by the sun, but you know, you're gonna pick it and choose your times. And then Glamora and Torkoal, so you got 3 hazard clearers there. I don't think Skarmory gets defog anymore. I might be wrong, but is what it is. Ground type weaknesses, 2 immunities, only 1 like hard resist. Still pretty good. Like, ground type's gonna be dissuaded coming against you just because you have a Skarmory, period. End of story. And then Ghost, 3 weaknesses, 1 immunity. I guess that is probably why you go with Kangaskhan, right? Because going down the line, like, you have the resistant Umbreon, which is really solid, but you probably do want an immunity just so people don't like go Choice Scarf, Shadow Ball, Chandelure, or something. Because right now your team doesn't deal with that super well. Puts a lot of pressure on Umbreon. So I get why he did that. Kind of like something I didn't realize. Only 2 Pokemon, technically 1 really, in the entire format has access to Heal Bell. Sylveon doesn't have Heal Bell. Umbreon doesn't have Heal Bell. The only one that is Chimecho. Chimecho's not in the league, so nobody drafted Chimecho. So no Heal Bell users. I think that's a really interesting thing. Because back in the day, you took a fairy because you needed a cleric, or you took, if you didn't take a fairy, you took, sorry about that, Blissey or Chansey. But Sylveon, still a really good, solid Wish Passer. Still, you know, fairy's still a good offensive type. So, I think he'll do well. I like Ishi's team. I'm based on last season, sometimes he went out of the box when he didn't need to go out of the box. Like, for his Suicune sets is really the thing last season. I would urge him to avoid doing that with some of these Pokemon because a lot of these have really well-defined roles. Some of them don't. Some of them there's a lot of room to play, like with Sinistcha or Kangaskhan. And even Gengar is really versatile, especially because it's freed up a lot here because there's a little bit of role overlap between, like, you know, Delphox, Sinistcha, and Glamora. So I think that gives you a lot of room to play. Just pick the right things to play with, right? Speed tiers. He's got elite speed, you know. Anything that hits that 130 mark is what I consider to be elite speed. He's got it. That's very big. And it's a big jump, sure, from 134 to down to 110, but not a lot of things occupy that space to really be able to take advantage of it. To take advantage of that, you need a Pokemon at like 125 or higher before you start to abuse that gap. And there's very few Pokemon that live in that spot. So I think this speed gap is something I think he can be pretty comfortable with. A drop from Quaquaval to Sinistcha could be exploitable, but I mean, 15 is razor thin margins to exploit, so I wouldn't worry about it. Everything else looks really good. Speed stat covered well. We already talked about the typings. These stats look solid. Little bit lacking in the physical offense department. Quaquaval and Mudsdale being your 2 big physical attackers, I think could be limiting if you run into a really big special wall, but I do think this is probably one of the best times to kind of go crazy. Oh, sorry, those are physical attackers, my bad. This is one of the best times to go crazy on special attackers because no Blissey, no Chansey, no Assault Vest. Physical attackers have their upside too because they can't be punished as much by things like Rocky Helmet. But I do think that there might be some issues breaking through some certain especially defensive Pokemon in the league. But that's that for Ishii's team. We can move on to the next one. We got Zeng, my opponent for this week. So I got to be careful because I've already done quite a bit of planning. I don't want to give away too much here, but let's break it down. Zeng, I think, you know what? I want to talk about the 2 Megas right off the bat. Now, Zeng made no question that he was going to be going for Mega Meganium, and he did, and he got it. He went for Mega Beedrill later. I really do like this Mega Beedrill pick. I like having, like, fairy killers on my team. And Mega Beedrill, I think, is really good at that. I love how min-max it is. It's just like, they went, how do we take a Pokemon that has 395 base stats with Beedrill? Even if we give it 100, it still has a lower base stat total than, like Scyther, you know? And it's already going to be weak to, like, there's only so much we can do just by pumping points into this. They min-maxed it, they took down special attack, just pumped everything into speed and attack. I love how they designed this Pokemon to do one thing and one thing alone, and it's still just okay. So I like Beedrill. I think it's going to be difficult to get a spot on the team because the Beedrill and Mega Meganium are not Pokemon you're going to be bringing both of them, because otherwise you're stuck with just a Beedrill or just Meganium. And that is hard to justify, in my opinion. I do like seeing both of them. Very matchup dependent if Beedrill is going to be able to come. He's got regular Pikachu, which is kind of exciting. I think if Pikachu's going to break out anywhere, it's going to be in this. Light Ball's in the game, right? Let me just check, because if it's not, I don't like this idea as much. L-I-G-H-T. Okay, it is in the game. Good. I didn't see it for a second. I was a little worried for poor Pikachu there. But look at this top-end speed. We got 145, 125, 122, 120, 110. Very scary top-end speed. That's very strong. It's gonna be forcing a lot of Scarfers. Then we got Pikachu at 90. 20-point gap there isn't great. Potentially exploitable, right? If there is, like, 15 is the minimum. Anything bigger than that is easier to exploit. It gets a little different as the stats go up and down, but in the ranges that we mess with a lot, 120 to 80, a 15-point gap is really where those natures come into play. Although I don't know if that's the same at level 50, and with the way they calculate stats and champions, I might need to do some reconsidering on that. But project for another day, right? No other big speed gaps to worry about. The fact that the slowest thing on his team is 67 points is pretty wild to me. Sorry, I had to drink some water. I think that's pretty, like, most of the time we'll see like something with 67 up at like the 8 or 9 right here, and then stuff down into the 20s and 30s. So this is actually pretty high speed overall. Additionally, what's hidden here is Basculegion ramps that up even higher, with Basculegion being able to have Swift Swim. This is a very fast team. It's a very fast, very offensive team. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do with it. I think I don't really think there's anything super big to be gleaned from the order here. Like, I'd been talking to Dakota before I think the draft was, well, the draft was still going. Like, once he got around to like Greninja, we're like, where do you think he's gonna go? And I'm like, he's probably gonna get like a Rain Core to support Mega Meganium. Mega Meganium does really well in the rain. Mega Soul ignoring the drawbacks to rain, so it just gets the fire protection basically from rain, and still gets the benefit in all the other ways. So Mega Meganium, very strong in rain. Went a little discount and got Politoed to be his rain guy instead of Pelipper. Although in this meta, I don't think it's too bad, because rocks and stuff are going to be ubiquitous, and Politoed is a little less bothered by that. Probably buys you a couple more switch-ins with Politoed compared to Pelipper. Yeah, and then Weevil and Diggersby just kind of round things out. Like, needed to get a ground type. He got one. Having a normal type's not bad by any means. We just kind of talked about ghost types being around, but he has got 2 normal types, actually. So he's double set there. Looking at the stats, bit of a fire weakness, but on a rain team, less of an issue. His only fire resist being Basculegion and Politoed, the Rain Core. Oh, and Greninja, excuse me. So we could see some issues there, but I think overall he's going to be fine. The Electric is also a little bit of a problem, but he's got really solid resist, and Meganium, who's probably going to be there almost every week. Pikachu is probably not coming super often, but Diggersby, I think, oh man, I don't love that Diggersby is going to be one of his most important switch-ins to electric types, but also takes super effective damage from water, which if rains up is a little bit more of a problem, right? Grass is not a super scary offensive type, so I think it's probably okay. Rock, we talked about only having 1 rock weakness. What are the hazard clearing options he's got? Just defog on Corviknight. That could be a problem, especially since his hazard setter is, I guess Diggersby probably still gets hazards. Let me double check that. But his other hazard is Cleavor. Oh no, Cleavor gets defog as well. But not having spin when you're, not having spin in this, I think is not great. Diggersby, no stealth rocks. Yes, spikes. So I think that is maybe a flaw in this team. I think the hazard control options could probably be tweaked a little bit. Overall, Zhang's another one who kind of goes all over the place with this team composition. Like, this is obviously not a traditional setup of a team. Like, the 2 cores we talk about, Fairy, Steel, Dragon, Fire, Water, Grass. He doesn't have a dragon. He doesn't have a fire type. So it's different. And the funny thing is, I remember there was a YouTuber that I watched, Cooper, who he's like, man, I never really got the dragon aspect of the Fairy, Steel, Dragon core, because all the dragon's doing is giving you a fire resist, and you can get fire resist elsewhere. And it doesn't have a fire type, which is also a fire resist. So kind of, I think that's a little funny. His only fire resist on the team being water types. But it's a rain team. That's gonna happen, right? So I just do want to go back real quick. So let's go all the way back to the front. So we got weather on Alola Ninetales. We got weather on T-Tar and Mega Frostlass. We've got weather on Torkoal, and we've got weather on Politoed. Weather is around, so like take it seriously, right? Next we've got Zane. Zane led off with some of the maybe one of the scariest fire water grass cores I feel like I've seen in a long time. So, and not that this is like a traditional core, but like Dark Fighting, Ghost, Psychic, also like putting those 4 types together, those seem to come together in my mind. I think that those are really good to have. But you got your Fire Water Grass. You have a Spinner. You have your Spike Setters. Garchomp, one of the best hazard setters in the league, and then you got your Fairy Steel Grass at Garchomp, Clefable, King Gambit. Going for a Spathra afterwards. A Spathra is not as good without Terra, but it's still something that can sweep people if they kind of let it get out of control. Rotom-Mow, you got your electric type in there. It's something to take a little bit of the pressure off of Chestnut, who I was considering going for Chestnut, so good for Zane for going and getting it, because I probably would have been taking it with one of my 2 picks if it hadn't made it back to me. Komao-O, so now you have your fighting type, which, you have a different fighting type that can do different things. It's also a dragon type that can do different things. Poltegeist, really reliable sweeper and a spin blocker, something else I think is important in this meta game. If you're going to be setting up hazards, you want a way to keep the hazards on the field. And then Ariados, grounded poison type, toxic spike setter, web setter. Love the team top to bottom. I think the only Pokemon that I don't really like on this team is Espathra, but I feel like it's there. It's only going to come if there's like a really good matchup for it. Espathra is not something you have to lean on, thankfully, with the way the rest of this team is constructed. So, nothing really to say there. Speed tiers. This is a minor gap. Very difficult to abuse it because there's very few Pokemon at 101 speed, which I think is probably where you'd have to be to abuse the speed tier. All the other gaps are okay. A little bit of a gap here, but that's kind of in the spot where you're thinking about defensive versus offensive minded Pokemon. How much EVs are you even going to run there? Hard to say. Speed looks good. Offensive stats, well distributed. Like Zane is like, he does a really good job of balancing his teams really well. Flying weakness, that's actually pretty big here. So that's something interesting that I hadn't noticed. His only resist being King Gambit, and a lot of flying types would get coverage there. If anybody goes and picks up Palucha, that's looking very scary against this team. Ghost weakness. This actually isn't as bad as it looks because his 2 dark types, even both of them might come most weeks. And then on top of that, you have Chesnaught, which has bulletproof, so you can't spam Shadow Ball. Physical ghosts are not super strong, so I think that this is actually not as bad as it looks. Fairy's a little bit more of a problem because we did just go through it. Everyone's got a fairy. And Skeledirge is going to get worn down if hazards are up, so you got to control that. Your other fair resist is Ariados, which probably won't be coming a ton of weeks. So definitely something to look out for Zane. Nobody's ever going to make a team that's just green bars all the way across here. I mean, you could theoretically do that, but between rolls and speed, there's always going to be a hole. It's in the covering these red boxes or these speed tier gaps is all going to be about team building and the player. So, but this is just about as close to like a perfect team as I think someone could build in this. I'm really loving this team. Got plenty of setting options. He's got enough clearing options. Actually, wait, does he just have the? He just got the 1 rapid spin. Probably not. That's probably not ideal, but this is. I'm souring on it now. I don't think it's bad. It's just not as good as I thought. Because having only the 1 clear... Oh, jeez. Having only the 1 clearing option is suboptimal, right? So you're just going to have to be running a lot of offense. You're just be like, click Cecil's Edge 2 times to open up the battles. You get 2 hit KO'd by Mega Samurott. And then come in with Garchomp and get up hazards and then start Dragon Tailing stuff around. Just kind of chipping stuff up. If your opponent can manage to get up hazards at the same time, that becomes more of a problem because now your next spot goes to Starmie. Now 3 of your options are focused around hazards. And I'm not saying he has to build like this. This is just like kind of the thought process behind building hazard stacking teams. Starmie is a good Pokemon. It's not the strongest spinner in the world because it doesn't have a good way to punish ghost types. Like Shadow, like it's not super, like it's only got 100 special attack. There's no life orb in the game. You're not going to be running spell tag on Starmie to boost the Shadow Balls. So Starmie can kind of get bullied a little bit as a rapid spin user. So at that point, you're just like, okay, am I just going to go straight up offense? This team, the way this offense is set up, isn't actually super offensive. You have Clef, Rotom, Chesnaught, even King Gambit. Those are more slow-paced defensive threats. So I do think that maybe there's a little bit of a stylistic clash there. Like your big offensive threats are not the super fast ones. Like Starmie's a decent oh jeez, I keep clicking there. Starmie's a decent offensive threat. And it's decently fast, but there's a lot of stuff in the 120 range that Starmie's just going to be slower than. Like you might run Scarf, Hisuian, Samurott a lot as your offensive. There's like I said, not a bad team, but I do think the bulky balance combined with the hazard stacking, I think hazard stacking works better on offense in my opinion. opinion. But I still think a very well-constructed team. I have no doubt Zane's going to use it well. Moving on, we've got Dakota. Dakota ended up with a wheel in, like, the back wheel, which is great to have the back wheel in a, draft of all these, scary new Pokemon. It's, a little worrisome because you're just doing so much reacting. But I like the team that Dakota put together. So first of all, he did what, Dakota's known for I think Dakota's probably known for this more than anybody else, in my opinion. And again, it's not bad. A lot of people do it. But we got Fire, Water, Grass, Fairy, Steel, Dragon. Charizard and X being the link between the two cores. Was there a 2 Megas thing here? No. Okay. I already talked about the 2 Megas there. Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss out an opportunity to talk about a double Mega situation. So, Meowscarada I think is important in this league. I'm not gonna switch back to the other thing here, but Meowscarada, in terms of first round picks, Meowscarada beats 4 of the other 5 first round picks just on its own. Beats Hisuian Samurott, Mega Delphox, Palafin, and Starmie. So I think that was a very important Pokemon to get. There's another Pokemon I was targeting if it managed to make it back to me. Not surprised it didn't. Pairs that with Rotom Wash. Good, flip U-turn, Volt Switch synergy. Being able to get in the right Pokemon for the right matchup. These two work really well together for that. Mega Charizard X, I think a forgotten offensive Pokemon. Having access to Roost DD, super strong in this metagame where I think there's less answers to it that exist. One thing that I don't love about it is, the scary water types at the top of the draft between Hisuian Samurott, Palafin, and Mega Starmie. And even Quaquaval's around here. There's the Rain team. I think that a lot of people's defensive options end up including a bulky water type. Charizard struggles to get past those, but your first 2 draft options do help you break through it. Obviously, you take a Charizard, that means you got to get spin options, and you have that in Fortress. And sneakily down here, you have Conkeldurr with Defog and Mousehold with Tidy Up. So Dakota's clearing options are actually pretty plentiful. So I like what he's got going on there. You also got Roserade as a secondary grass option. I love having secondary options for your big poke, your traditionally defensive types. I always like having a second option. If you take an offensive grass type or an offensive water type, always nice to have a second one because sometimes they can fall into the role a little bit better. Seeing Aegislash here is really exciting. Aegislash, a very strong Pokemon with a lot of options. It also gives Dakota some priority that his team currently lacks a bit of right now outside of Meowscarada. They also picked up great priority users in Mamoswine and Conkeldurr, so that's good. Mega Floette's exciting to see. Sorry, not Mega Floette. Floette Eternal is exciting to see. First time we're seeing this. Dakota, famous for using Florges, ends up trying out the new model here. Let me pull up on the side here. Let me pull up Florges' stats just to compare. Because I think Florges is probably 8 points, 7 points? 7 points. Okay. So, stats here. So HP is about the same. 74 on Floette's to 78 on Florges. Attacks irrelevant. Defenses 67 on the Floette, 68 on Florges, essentially the same. And then we start to get some divergence here. We've got special attack 112 on Florges to 125 on Mega Floette. Additionally, Mega Floette has Light of Ruin, which is a very strong fairy move with recoil. Spadef 154 on Florges to 128 on Mega Floette. So obviously a bit of a drop off there, but I still think enough to get the job done. I think this is honestly the most important one. 92 speed compared to Florges' 75. So a lot of ways Mega Floette's Floette Eternal is an upgrade. Also in some ways it's kind of a side grade. It doesn't have it's got about the same move pool. but it's just a little faster, a little less bulky, but definitely a little stronger, a little bit more offensive-minded Florges, which is one of the ways that Dakota likes to use Florges. So I think he'll probably do really well with this. Speed tiers. Ooh, this gap between 80 and 60 is a bit problematic. But I think it's okay. Like, you know, I don't even know why I call it the speed tiers at this point. It's something I always look for when kind of planning for a team, but it's always something that can, like, as long as you're aware of it, you can, it's something you can deal with. You can always play around it. So yeah, I probably should stop calling it out. Offensively, nothing looks amiss there. Defensively, everything looks fine. You know, like I said, got most of your important speed tiers covered. Everything else can be dealt with. Weaknesses. Fire. Only have the 1 resist to fire and Mega Charizard. Oh, and Rotom Wash. You got 2 fire resist. So, not a ton of offensive fire in the league. Let's see. Skeledirge is not offensive. Meganium has a strong fire move, but it's not offensive. Mega Delphox, obviously, very offensive. Infernape, very offensive. No fire types on this team? Oh, no, Chandelure. Who am I kidding? Yeah, they're around, but I think there's enough answers where that's not too concerning. Ground types, 1 immunity, 1 resist. That is one of the, I've used Roserade a lot. That's one of the downsides to it. I like my grass types to be able to come in and take ground moves, and unfortunately Roserade's bad at that. So it is a concern that ground weakness could be exploited and become a problem, but let's see how it goes. But overall, those are the only like holes in the typing that I think are maybe a problem, but you know, manageable. I think that's real. Oh, and then in terms of roles, you got Hazard Setter, Hazard Clearer, Hazard. Yeah, you got plenty of stuff here. I think on a team like, oh yeah, you have a Toxic Spike user, so that's good. Also, I guess I should just call out, Ariados is probably something on Zane's team I might actually bring a little bit more often, just because of the defensive mindedness of it. I think Toxic Spikes will be a little bit more effective. Although, let's see, Grounded Poison, Grounded Poison, two Grounded Poisons, Grounded Poison, Grounded Poison. Yeah, so everyone's got a way to soak up Toxic Spikes. Grounded Poison is almost becoming a checklist option. So I think that's all I have to say on this. Let's go over, I'm going to pull this over here. Let's see how that looks. That looks good enough. So matchups for this week, we've got Dakota taking on Mike. So we got Meowscarada versus the Mega Starmie. We're going to be the first person taken on, and they have a pretty good check to it. I'm taking on Zeng, like I said, did quite a bit of planning for that already. Got Ishii taking on Zane. That's the only match I haven't really like looked too closely at. I don't see any significant issues for either team here. I do think Ishii's offensive Pokemon can be, like, Zane's got really good checks for a lot of Ishii's offensive Pokemon, but he's got to pick the right checks to bring, right? Ishii's not out of it by any means. He just needs to, I think he needs to, it's going to be a 50-50. Like, he can bring X and Y, and hopefully he doesn't run into defensive Pokemon A and B. You know, that's how it is. They got a better team builder, I think, is going to come out there. We're still going to do week 0 ad drops. So if there's any changes that people feel need to be made, those will be put in later this week. And we'll go from there. So thank you all for listening. See you next week. Goodbye.